My name is Gavin Evans, and today I'm going to be ranking all of Quentin Tarantino's movies from worst to best. Now, I know many people claim him to be one of the best directors ever, but I don't. I think he's a good director, I think he's an interesting director, and I think he's made some great movies, but I don't think he's one of the best. But, anyways, let's begin with last place. Quentin Tarantino's worst movie is Reservoir Dogs. I know that pick might come as a shock to some people, but just rewatching it this time, it did absolutely nothing for me. Now, I will say that the torture scene is iconic, the cast does a fine job, and I do like the opening scene where we see all these characters interacting with each other, but it just feels like a tease for something we never got. We don't see all these characters together again. And then on top of that, the main plot of this movie I found to be very uninteresting. It should have been a mystery. Who turned us in? And they just approach it in the most straightforward, unsatisfying way they could have. And then the movie's completely reliant on these flashbacks, which I find to be lazy, and all these flashbacks just destroy the movie's pacing. They're very boring scenes. And then the last flashback where we get all the answers we're looking for, I'm just like, oh, okay, so it was that guy. And then the scene goes on and on and on and on. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like, it does not need to be this long. I think it's the worst paced Tarantino movie. I think it's the least interesting story. I think it's got the least memorable characters. And yes, it does have some Tarantinoisms in the plot, but we've seen him do those same Tarantinoisms in future movies much better, so there's just no reason to watch this one again. It's a very lacking movie. My second least favorite movie of Quentin Tarantino, or my ninth favorite, whatever you want to label it as, is Kill Bill Volume 2. Now, the only reason why this movie isn't in last place isn't just because the grave scene is intense. It's not because I enjoy the flashbacks where the bride is getting trained, but it's because of the scene where she removes Belle's eyes. Like, that is legitimately one of the most horrific scenes Tarantino has ever made. Daryl Hannah's screams afterwards are just haunting and disturbing. But those scenes aside, this movie is just unsatisfying in every possible way. We get all this build-up. We get an entire first movie of build-up. And an hour and 45 minutes of build-up in this movie. And to have as such little payoff as we get here is just so unsatisfying. She kills Bill in like 5 seconds. All that build-up for that. It's not artistic to not deliver. It's lazy and retroactively brings down everything that comes out beforehand. And to even have the decision for the bride to reveal her name is Beatrix, it's just like you were hiding it in such a deliberate attempt before. Why ruin that? And then there's also this guy who defeats the bride. He buries her. And then we don't even get the satisfaction of him realizing that she survived and for her to kill him. We don't even get satisfaction in that front. It's just the most underwhelming, unsatisfying, lacking sequel we could have possibly gotten. And if it weren't for those three scenes, specifically the eye scene, this movie would easily be in last place. My next movie in 8th place is Kill Bill Volume 1. Now, out of all the movies I rewatched for this list, this was easily the biggest drop in quality. I remember loving this movie, having an absolute blast with it, and that just wasn't the case this time. I don't mind style over substance, but I don't know, this movie just didn't really work for me all that much this time. Now that said, there is some great moments. I do like the anime sequence. I found that to be very unique and creative. There is a couple comedic scenes that use an excessive amount of blood, and there is some great action scenes that are really well shot. But this movie just has far too much build-up and so little actually happening. It doesn't actually feel like a movie. It just feels like a sequence of events with very little narrative flow. I also found the style to be kind of messy in times. I found the use of the soundtrack to be very messy, like especially in that last scene. You got yourself an excellent song in Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood by Santa's Marta, but the use of it, it builds very well. And then when they finally start fighting, it's just, it should have been better utilized. And the constant sound effects and some of the camera angles that just didn't work for me. I think this is a very hit or miss movie. Maybe slightly more hit, but it's still far from Tarantino's best. So that's why it's in 8th place. My 7th favorite movie, and I kind of wish this was in 8th place just for the name of the title, but it comes in 7, and that's The Hateful Eight. Now, I do like this movie. I think there's lots of good things about it, mainly the performances. Everyone does a great job. Jennifer Jason Leigh, Kurt Russell, Walton Goggins, Bruce Stone, Harvey Keitel, Tim Roos, but the standout in this movie is without any doubt Samuel L. Jackson. In fact, I feel like he should have been nominated for this movie. This is one of his very best performances. He is so fantastic here. And I do think the movie is well directed for the most part. It's got some amazing cinematography. I really like the score by Ennio Morricone, which I definitely mispronounced his name. And this is one of those movies where you really do feel the coldness the most. Like, you can just hear the winds, you can see the characters shivering. You feel cold as you're watching this movie. There was some great tense moments in this movie, some great bloody moments in this movie, and the characters are really well defined. So it seems like I'm being overwhelmingly positive with this movie, that despite all that, it just doesn't come together the way I wish it did. I always feel like this movie should have been a whodunit. The setup is absolutely perfect for a whodunit. And for them to go the direction they went in just feels so unsatisfying. As well written as this movie is in moments, the overall story is just absolutely lacking. There's not much narrative that's giving this movie momentum. You're just waiting for things to fall apart, for shit to hit the fan. And if there was just a whodunit angle, that would have that happened a lot more naturally. Because the way it just goes down here, it feels like one of those movies that thinks it's so clever and filled with all these twists and turns, but it's really not. It's a very straightforward movie. And I just wish that for all the good that this movie has, that it had a strong story to just enhance the movie overall. So that's why it's in 7th place. And 6th place is a movie that might shock people. It's this high up. Like, I always see this movie dead last in every single Tarantino list. But I enjoyed Death Proof. It is just a very simple, nice, effective, grindhouse, throwback, action, horror type movie. And it's just my kind of movie. I think Kurt Russell's great in it. I think the entire finale with the girl on the hood of the vehicle as they're getting chased was really fantastic. And there's some really great dialogue in the first half of this movie. Now, is there pacing issues? Yes, I would say so. Is it the best written Tarantino movie? No, but I don't think this movie is ever trying to be more than what it is. It knows what it is, it's fully aware of it, and it just wants to have fun, and I think the movie succeeds in that. So that's why it's in 6th place. In 5th place is the movie that got the biggest boost on this latest rewatch, because the first time I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I didn't really care for it, but this time, it worked for me much better. Brad Pitt, I always loved his performance in this movie, and that's still the case. I think he is so amazing here. I think this is one of his very best performances. And to say that about someone like Brad Pitt, that's saying a lot. I also think Leonardo DiCaprio is really good in this movie. I also think Julia Walters and Margaret Qualley are both really good in this movie. In fact, I feel like those are the two female performances that should be talked about with this movie, more so than Margot Robbie, because she doesn't do much for me in this movie at all. Those two are great performances. Margot Robbie, not so much. And even though they're not in this movie all that much, it is nice to see Dakota Fanning in a movie again. And I just watched Euphoria again, and I'm just like, wait, is that Sydney Sweeney? And yes, it is. I didn't know she was in this movie before, but she's fine for the 2 seconds she's in it. And this movie has some great scenes. There's some really tense scenes, some really funny scenes. In the last 15 minutes of this movie are just absolute awesome, just fantastic stuff. But it is lacking a clear narrative. I don't think Sharon Tate was needed in this movie at all. That entire angle of what he was going for with that storyline, I don't think it adds anything. I much prefer this movie when it's focusing on Brad Pitt's character and Leonardo DiCaprio's movie. Anytime it goes back to Sharon Tate, I'm just like, oh right, she's in this. I kind of forgot. I don't think the narration bit before the finale was needed. I think that could have been cut. But there is still so much great stuff here. Lots of great moments, lots of great performances that I can't help but really enjoy this movie. So that's why it's in 5th place. In 4th place is another movie that's always near the bottom of every Tarantino list. And I don't get why, because I think this is one of his better earlier works, and it's Jackie Brown. I think this movie is great. The soundtrack in this movie is absolutely fantastic. I think the performances are great. Pam Grier, Samuel L. Jackson, Robert Forster are some of the very best stuff ever. I think the story keeps you guessing each and every single character's motivation and what they're trying to do, and you're trying to figure out what's going to happen before it happens. And it just keeps you on edge and it keeps you entertained. Now, it is a bit too long. I think the editing is amateurish in moments. And I don't think we needed the non-linear approach with the finale. But all that said, I still really enjoy this movie. So that's why it's in 4th place. My 3rd favorite Tarantino movie is Django Unchained. Now, before I get to my positives, I will say that I do think this movie is about 40 minutes too long and that the last act is way too stretched out. But all that said, I think this movie has the greatest soundtrack in a Tarantino movie. It's got some of the best moments in a Tarantino movie, some of the funniest, some of the most tense, and the payoff at the end is just perfection. Every single performance in this movie is absolutely incredible. Leonardo DiCaprio is excellent as the villain here. Jamie Foxx is so great in the lead. Christoph Waltz is really fantastic as well. Kerry Washington is really good in this movie. But the standout performance to me, yet again, is Samuel L. Jackson. I feel like this might be his best performance, which I feel like I already said and might say again, to be honest. But boy, he's just so awful in this movie, and he really got under my skin, and I don't think I've ever seen this kind of performance from him before. And he's just really terrific in it. And like I said, this movie's got some funny moments, it's got some tense moments, it's really well directed, and just the soundtrack is just so fantastic. So all those reasons is why it's my 3rd favorite. My 2nd favorite Tarantino movie is Pulp Fiction. Now, if I'm going to be honest, while I was about to rewatch it, I'm just like, you know what? I got the feeling that I might not like it as much this time around. But I was so glad to be proven wrong because this movie is even better than I remember. Now, that said, I do strongly believe that this movie did not need Bruce Willis. That is easily the weakest part of the movie, and I don't think it was needed. I don't think it adds much to the overall narrative. But that said, just everything else in this movie is perfection. This movie has some of the best dialogue ever. Just every line of dialogue is fantastic. It reveals a lot about the characters. It's really funny. They're talking about interesting stuff. It feels authentic. It's just top-notch dialogue in every possible way. I think the performances are all great in this movie. Bruce Willis is really good. John Travolta gives one of his best performances ever, if not his best. Samuel L. Jackson gives one of his best performances ever, if not his best. He is so terrific in this movie. Harvey Keitel gives his best performance ever in a movie, in my opinion, in this one. I think he's so wonderful here. Uma Thurman's great in this movie. Eric Stoltz's really great in this movie. Every single performance is fantastic. Now, just like lots of Tarantino's other movies, it does lack a bit of a clear narrative, but I also argue that this movie's whole point is about second chances and also a deconstruction of the gangster characters. The way that you see the two gangster characters at the start of the movie and how they look and are at the end of the movie, I feel like it's a deconstruction, and I think it really works looking at it from that angle. But just every single scene is just so terrific and funny and tense and just unique and unlike anything else. And oh my goodness, like that scene where he accidentally blows Marvin's head off. It's so bloody and violent, but it's hilarious. That scene where John Travolta and Uma Thurman are doing the tryst together, that is such a charming, wonderful scene, and this movie is just great. I absolutely love it. Like I said, I could do without the Bruce Willis stuff, but this movie still has lots of great moments, and I really love it, so that's why it's in second place. But my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie was always going to be Inglourious Basterds. I think Brad Pitt said it best at the end of this movie. I think this might just be my masterpiece. And sure enough, it is Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece. Just every single Tarantinoism that we've seen in his other movies comes into play here in such a masterful way, which is undoubtedly used the most effectively. The use of structure and showing every character who are coming to play later, their perspective, why they're doing what they're doing, and just watching it build to this one event is just so masterful here. The dialogue is just fantastic in this movie. It's both character revealing and really funny moments. Every single character feels so well defined, whether they're in the movie for like an hour or 2 minutes. Just everyone feels well written. And the performances are all incredible. Brad Pitt gives one of his absolute best performances. He's hilarious and just fantastic here. I think Dan Kruger's really good, but the standout to me was Christoph Waltz. This is watching a master of his craft doing what he is best at. The way he remains in control in every conversation is just absolutely masterful. The way he approaches people, he comes across as nice, as understanding, and just slowly lets down each and every one of their guards until he gets the information he needs. Christoph Waltz just pulled it off perfectly. It is one of the greatest performances ever. And it also makes for some incredibly tense scenes. Unlike lots of his other movies where moments feel bloated, I feel like this movie takes its time in the very best of ways to get you invested in a scene and gets you wanting to see how it plays out, making it all the more intense. I think this movie also has hilarious moments, and just narratively, it's his most satisfying. It's his most cohesive movie. I just think it excels in everything that Tarantino has ever tried to do in a movie. My only complaint is that I do think there's an inconsistent usage of subtitles. And there's like a 2-second sex scene which just comes out of nowhere for me. But those two issues can't hurt my enjoyment of this movie at all because it is just fantastic. It is his masterpiece. I love it. It's his best movie, and that's why it's in first place. But how would you rank Quentin Tarantino's movies from worst to best? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.